Right, hello, welcome. Hi, Kat. We have a giant hole in our wall, as it turns out, which is pretty lame. And we rent, and our landlord should just fix it. But since they're the ones that put the hole there to begin with, I'm thinking that's really just more trouble than it's worth. So fixing holes in drywall is actually really easy, and I figured I'd just go ahead and make this thing happen and make a short video of it. So, pretty easy to do. Now, oddly enough, the first thing you need to do with a big hole like this is make it bigger. And that's because you've got to cut it back to where the 2x4s are so you can screw on a new piece of drywall. You shouldn't try and patch a large hole like this with like drywall patch or something like that. You really need a piece of drywall in here. So I'm gonna cut around. I wanna first mark out how I'm gonna cut. So I have a little level here, and I'll just mark out a line, something like that. Hammer time. I want to figure out where the 2x4s are, so I'm just gonna break this back slowly, and as soon as you hit one, you'll know it. That's the edge of that one, and then on this side, same thing. So see, when there's not a 2x4, it just breaks away, and then as soon as you hit one, you know it like that. So that's kind of where I have to cut. That's gonna be the thing that I cut out. So, have a utility knife. Cuts really easy. You can use an old saw too. Something like that. So we now have a nice square opening, and you'll see, hopefully you can see this part of the 2x4 right here, and this part of the 2x4 right here as well. So that will give me something to install my new sheet of drywall against. You can pick up a square drywall like this from any hardware store. It's really cheap, it's just a few dollars. And you just have to cut it to fit the square that you just cut in the wall. So once you've marked a line on it for the right height, just take a level or any straight object really, and place it on your marks, and then take a knife and cut it right along that straight edge. Don't worry about cutting through it. You've just got to make a light score on there. And then that should allow you to break it in half really easily like that. Once you do that, you just cut the back side. Right, like that. So now I have something that is the right height, and I'll just put it up there, mark it to length. And do the same thing with the length. Should break very easy. Just like that. Now you can either use drywall nails or drywall screws to attach your new sheet of drywall to both studs here and here. 1.5 inches is usually about the right size. Our next step is to tape the joints, and they make a fiberglass tape that just sticks on at this point, and you just stick it on here. I have this paper stuff, which is the old kind that they used to use. It's not as good, but it's what I have. This you have to put a little bit of drywall compound or paste or mud on it first before you put the strips on. You don't have to do that with the fiberglass tape, and I really highly recommend the fiberglass. I just had this, and back when I was a kid, they didn't have these fancy fiberglass tapes, so I'm cool with this. But yeah, normally I would just put the fiberglass tape on here and then mud over it like that. And when I say mud over it, I mean use this drywall paste. Now, putting this tape on these joints is extremely important because it prevents it from cracking. You've probably seen cracks in a wall before, and those usually happen along seams. So in order to prevent that, you just have to put some tape on there. There we go. So that should hold those seams together. So once the tape is on, you'll want to go over it with a thin coat of your drywall compound, or drywall mud, as it's called. Notice I'm going over the tape, and I'm also going over the entire piece of drywall. This allows me to make sure that it's all the same thickness and consistency. So it took a really long time to dry, but it's finally totally dry. What we need to do now is kind of sand this off, hit all the high spots, and then we'll probably put another thin layer on here to get it perfectly smooth. You can actually buy special drywall sandpaper that works a little bit better, lasts longer, but any coarse sandpaper will work. This is 80 grit sandpaper that I had laying around, so I'm using that instead of buying special drywall sandpaper. Now when you do this, you'll still get some low spots and things that you'll want to go back over. So that's what we're going to do now. When you're applying the drywall paste or the mud, if you go with an angle that's kind of flat to the wall, you'll smooth things out, but you won't scrape much of it off. But if you want to scrape a bunch of it off, you can go with an angle that is more perpendicular to the wall like this, and it will scrape more of the drywall paste that you applied. We'll scrape it off a bit more. I think we'll go ahead and let that dry, sand that, and that might just be our last coat. We've put 2 coats of drywall mud on the area that we patched, and we've sanded it down, and it's looking pretty smooth. You can buy these spray-on wall texture cans for small areas and just spray on the texture. But it's a good idea to kind of experiment with them. Most of them will have an adjustment. So use a board or a piece of cardboard and kind of spray on there to test it and see if you can get close to the texture of the wall. So sometimes you'll need to just lightly trowel over something. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking the trowel and very lightly smoothing it out to kind of flatten off the top and get a little bit better match to the texture. That's rare, especially with newer houses. Most of the time it's just directly sprayed on. Our last step is to paint the area. This is self-explanatory. If it's a small area, you can just use a brush. Anything will work. And any paint shop will match the color of your walls. That's pretty important. If it's a different color, it's obvious there's a patch. The paint might dry a slightly different color than it goes on wet. So don't panic if when it goes on wet, you can still see a color difference. Just let it dry and make sure that it looks right then. Now to help you match the colors, what I'd recommend is when you are cutting out the hole and making it a regular sized shape, just save a little piece of your wall. All you need is like a quarter size piece. So that's it. Good as new. Right then, we have a hole in our wall, which is pretty lame. You gonna come and inspect things? What do you think? Do you approve? Huh? Your tail's in the way. Yeah. Actually, you are in the way. All of you. Yeah. Make sure that you're doing this correctly, because if you don't, your building inspector might come along and disapprove. How we doing, Kat? Everything look up to code?